Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our My Law in Spain seminar about building your own home. This is going to be a dream for many people, carefully selecting your own plot and then instructing architects to design your dream house and then contracting builders to build that forever house. How exciting is that? This seminar is all about helping you turn that dream into reality and not into a nightmare. So I'd like to welcome my panelists today. I've got Jonathon. Hi, Jonathon. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Jonathon. I'm an architect. I've been working in architecture now for almost 21 years. I've been working in Spain for 7 years now, primarily doing luxury residential property across the Costa Blanca, Mallorca, a little bit on the Costa del Sol, a little bit in Madrid.
Excellent. Alison.
Hi Alex, thanks for inviting me to this seminar. My name is Alison de Cotta. I've been in Spain for 20 odd years. My background is finance. I've always been involved in that area, specifically private banking, worked with Credit Suisse, Société Générale, Banco Santander. And I specialised for the last 5 years in arranging mortgages, specifically, well, mainly for non-resident clients. And I set up Mortgage Matters Spain over a year ago. I'm a fully qualified UK mortgage broker and also a Spanish ICI intermediary qualification. So important that clients note that if they're using a broker, they have to be properly qualified.
Excellent. Patricia?
Hi. Well, I am a lawyer. I have been working for a bank agency in the past, and also I was a real estate agent in the Costa del Sol, and I joined My Lawyer in Spain in 2016, and since then I have been helping clients buying and selling properties.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's start with the basics. Even before looking for a property, you should really consider your finances. So how much is it going to cost you? How much is it going to cost you to buy the plot? And how much is the build going to cost? So Alison, how much could someone borrow from a bank in a self-build development?
Project. Okay. But as far as self-build is concerned, when you're looking at finance for a self-build, the first thing that's important to point out is that most of the banks will require you to buy the plot outright with your own savings. Okay, so they won't finance the purchase of the plot. What they will, and they'll need to see a copy of the deed saying that you're the owner of the plot before they look at the finance. What they will then finance is the build part of it. And they will do that in the form of a percentage of the architect's project or building costs. So the banks will lend to non-residents between 60 up to maximum 70% of the build cost, depending on your financial profile. So as I say, maximum 70% for non-residents and maximum 80% of the build cost for residents.
Excellent. Okay. So you've got your finances in place to buy your dream plot. What comes next? Well, obviously looking for that plot. And it's not always easy to find a plot of land which you can build on for what you want. So Jonathon, what advice as an architect would you give to people seeking to build their own home and how to find that dream plot?
Well, finding the dream plot, there are plenty of land agents, estate agents that can offer you the plot and find plots, as well as architects and builders. There's a huge number of people that have access to plots in Spain. The main thing is to do your research on the plot. What happens is you speak to people, you find your plot, you look at the plot, and people just fall in love with the plot. The danger of doing that is you have to find a plot which fits what you would like to build. And that can be the tricky bit, because every plot has their own rules and regulations that you have to look very carefully at to make sure you can build what you want to build. And that's something that people have to be very careful of.
Yeah, absolutely. So just I'll share this information with everyone now. When my parents moved out to Spain in 1981, and I moved then back to the UK in 92 to go to university. and returned in 2003. When I returned in 2003 with my wife at the time, we decided we would basically buy a plot. We'd sell up lock, stock and barrel in the UK and buy a house in Spain. So we started looking for a house, and we found some during that time. The prices were going up exponentially, and we arranged to visit a house here in Spain to buy. But by the time we come out, the price had gone up by 20 to 30,000 euros, and the pool wasn't included. So it was getting more and more expensive each time. That should have been a good warning sign for us. But basically, I took my friend with me to see that house, and he said, listen, for that amount of money, I could buy a plot of land, you can buy a plot of land, and I could build that house for you, because my friend was an architect. So that got us thinking, and we switched our search from houses to plots. And what we did is we went around, we were looking in the Axarquia area at the time, and we viewed various plots of land in Nerja and Torrox, and eventually settled on one plot of land. And it was very important for us to basically speak to a decent agent who knew a lot about the area and could tell us what could be built. And then we met with the overall developer, who had, in fact, what they had done is they had divided the plot of land up, the overall large plot of land, into lots of different mini plots, segregated those, and then they were selling them, not with the planning permission in place, but with the characteristics in place of what you could build. So we knew right from the start that what we could build. And that was basically, I'd say, Jonathan, we had a good estate agent there to help us. Yeah. So once you found your plot, Patricia, what's the next step?
Well, I think you and John have pointed out the most important part is checking what you can build on it. So that will be asking for a land search. So where you can see who is the owner of the plot, and if the seller can actually sell the property. You can check the type of land, which is going to be described as urban or rustic. So you should be looking for an urban property. And second, it will be advisable attending the town hall and asking for a certificate confirming the buildability of the plot, which means how many square meters you can actually build. So if you do that part along with your architect, then you can kind of confirm if the property, your dream house, can be actually built in that plot. So from the legal point of view, what we will do is preparing a legal report, confirming if there are some charges in the property, as they could be from previous owners, records of previous mortgages, there could be an embargo, etc. We want to see if it's free of charges. We want to see the type of land. We want to see that the seller can actually sell. We will be looking for some other things, as the local town hall rates for the plot, checking that there are no pending debts on it. We will prepare a legal report, which we would like to share as well with an architect to confirm everything is fine.
Excellent. Okay. And then what kind of taxes are payable on a plot purchase, Patricia?
In this case, it's very, very important to confirm because there is a huge difference if the seller is an individual or if it is a company. So if an individual person sells you a property, you will be paying a transfer tax, which varies from region to region in Spain. But if the seller is a company, you will find that you pay VAT at 21% plus stamp duty on top of that of 1.5%. So, for example, just to compare, if you buy a plot of land from an individual person here in Andalusia for 100,000 euros, you will be paying transfer tax at 8%. But compared to if the seller is a company, that will go up to 21% plus the stamp duty. So it is a huge difference, and it's important to know beforehand so you can prepare your figures.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So, and that's basically the procedure that I went through. We checked we checked with my friend the architect what could be built. Then we agreed the purchase price of the plot, and then we completed the purchase of that plot and registered it in our names, and completion happened at the notary. And thankfully, we actually bought it from an individual, so we didn't have to pay the VAT. We just paid transfer tax on that purchase. Okay, so Jonathan, our clients have selected the plot. What comes next?
Next is a large amount of discussion, conversation, lots of doodles going backwards and forwards between the architect and the client, finalizing a design, coming up with a design that works for the client in terms of the spaces that they want, the views they want, and within the budget that they want, and also meets with the normativa, with the regulations that we have to follow that controls what we can build on the site. So there's a bit of a balancing act that has to be done to meet everybody's requirements. Sometimes it's harder than others. It depends on the plot, but generally we 9 times out of 10 we'll find a solution and we'll get it to work exactly to the way that somebody wants, and they get the house of their dreams. That's the intention. So that's the first phase. Get the design to a level that everybody is happy with.
Yeah. So when we were designing our property, basically the architect produced a kind of basically a couple of drawings first, nothing to plan, but overall drawings and some various options. And we said, yeah, gosh, we like that. And then she progressed to basically to design the actual project. And just for the record, what we had, and any build would need this, we had an overall architect, and then we had an arquitecto técnico, and the overall architect, he or she deals with the design, and the arquitecto técnico is the person who's going to oversee the build on a daily basis.
Yeah. No, all projects in Spain you need 2 architects involved: the architect or an arquitecto técnico or a perejador that will be supervising the work on site. So you end up with both have to oversee the project. The architect takes over sort of overall responsibility, but the on-site work is supervised in reality by both. But the arquitecto técnico is the one that's looking at it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So once they've agreed the design, Jonathan, with you, and that's signed off, what's the next step?
Well, the next stage is you apply for the license. So that is your license application. So that would be planning in the UK. So it's not really a complex set of drawings. It's a basic set of drawings which give an idea of the plan layout, how it sits on the site, the external appearance. Often I'll include renders and visuals as well with that. And then there's a general report that goes with it to explain how it matches with the normativa on that site, the regulations on the site. That's then submitted with a fee. And then to a point you wait. Now that wait can vary hugely in Spain, depending on where it is. I've had licenses granted in 2 weeks in places, and other places 2 years. So often the architect, once you know the site, we will have some initial conversations with the town hall anyway. So before you get to that stage, you'll know roughly how long it's going to take, because the town hall will advise.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, in our case, I remember it took up to a year for the planning to come through. We were kind of applying for planning permission during a busy period between 2003 and 2005. And you mentioned a fee, and that fee varies from town hall to town hall.
Yes, it varies hugely. And I wish I could give you a rough figure, but it does vary hugely from place to place.
But usually it's based on a percentage.
It's a percentage
of what you estimate to be the value of the build. Is that right?
It's what the architect estimates to be the cost of the build. So
and that can be. Sorry, go on.
No, that figure can be slightly lower than the actual cost of the build, because it's not market price, it's the construction price. So there's a special scale that you follow and things like that to work it all out. And sometimes, in some cases, the town hall can disagree with the architect. That can happen in some cases. And what might happen is there'll be a balance to be paid at the end before you receive the license.
Okay, and I mean I've come across certain town halls that have asked the overall cost of planning as 7% of what an architect estimates to be the value of the build, and for example 4% of that is usually payable up front with the application or within a month, and then 3% basically, once planning has been granted, again within a month. And they've got very strict timetables, haven't they, for payment of the planning permission?
Oh yeah. It's you have to pay within it very quickly, and in certain periods of time. If you don't pay, it basically goes to the bottom of the pile, and you're almost starting the whole process again.
Yeah.
It's the same whenever they have any queries and things like that during the process. Now, it always happens. It's the same in the UK. The town hall can come back with a few questions, want clarification on a few details and things like that. You have a fixed period of time. You have to keep giving them the information. And in reality, it's in your best interest to do that, because the faster you can provide the information, the faster you'll get your license at the end.
Yeah, but just so people are aware that if you once the town hall issues the notification of payment, if you don't pay within the period, then they can actually add extra costs, penalty costs, and interest for failing to pay within that timescale.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your planning permission. Selecting a builder. How would you find a good builder, Jonathan? And what advice would you give in respect of choosing a builder?
Choosing a builder, well, normally it falls down to the architect. It's their responsibility to recommend some builders. Most architects don't just work with one builder, they work with several builders. Also, just through word of mouth, just speaking to friends and people who've gone through the same process. They can recommend builders that they've used and say whether they've had good experiences or bad experiences. During the time that you're waiting for the license, the architect isn't sort of sitting with twiddling his thumbs. Normally, you'll be working on the construction package. So what happens is you produce an entire construction package, which you will then send out to contractors. So I would recommend at least 3 you would send it out. You may want to send it out to more, you may want to send it out to less, but I would generally go for 3. You would send it out, they would then come back with a price based on the detailed package of information. And then you can select based on just price, but I would never recommend that. I would look at the price, but I would also recommend that the architect with the client, to look at buildings that they've already done in the past, and potentially even ask for references. Speak to other people that have used those builders and see the work that they've done.
Absolutely, I think this part is so crucial. You talk about the package that we sent to the builders for them to kind of quote. In effect, what the architects prepared is called the basic project, the Proyecto Básico, and that is then circulated to builders to quote for.
Well, there's 2 types. You can do your Proyecto Básico, but you can also send a Proyecto de Ejecución, which is every nut and bolt in the project. Which, if you do it that way, there's less room for interpretation. With a Proyecto Básico, a builder can interpret the drawings in his own way, in terms of allowing for certain finishes, allowing for certain types of kitchens or bathrooms and things like that. The more detail you can give them, the more accurate that price will be.
Okay, and that's absolutely essential, because from experience, I think it's really important that you provide the builder as much information about how you want the build to be completed and finished, so they can quote a closed quote.
Yeah.
And once you've got that closed quote, you know exactly how much you're going to borrow either from the bank or how much the overall bill is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Just so you're aware, what you're saying is actually correct. When we chose a builder, our architect sent the project out to 3 different builders, and then we went and saw buildings that each of those builders had completed. And we didn't go for the cheapest, we didn't go for the most expensive. We went for the middle range quote, and we went with the builder I felt more comfortable with, who was more trustworthy and had came with good references, and he was fairly local as well. And it was a good choice, because during the build things do happen, changes happen, and you've got to have a good relationship with that builder throughout the build, unless things go terribly wrong. But we have had situations with clients where the builder and the client have fallen out, and at that stage, if that does happen, then you can change your builder, but that could be costly. Yeah. Okay, so basically, Jonathan, you found a builder, you've got your license, what comes next? Talk to us about the building process.
The building process, in reality, should be relatively straightforward from a client's point of view. For an architect, it can get quite stressful, but for the client, it should be a relatively straightforward process. Generally, the first bit is the setting out of the building on the site, which is done with the architect and the builder. They set it out, and then that's double checked by the town hall to make sure that everything is in the place on the site where it's supposed to be. And then away you go with the building. Normally, it's the structure frame will go up first. In Spain, generally, buildings aren't like in the UK with brick walls. They're generally concrete frame. So you end up with this skeleton frame will go up first. That's often the point when an inspector will come out from the town hall just to double check again the project. And then there's a program of work where you just gradually work through the building. You start with the frame, then you will put down the external skin and the windows, then you do the first fix, where you start putting all the internal walls and doors in, then you go for your second fix, where you start putting all the lights and the kitchen and the bathroom and all of that sort of stuff will go in. And finally, you do all the landscaping.
So from a contractual point of view, we typically have foundations, structure, roof and ceilings in, and then the enclosing and finishing. That's basically how it would be divided. And it's very important to bear in mind is if you are building, going about this process, if you sell the property within 10 years, then you have to sell the property with basically what's known as the Seguro de Decenal, which is 10-year insurance policy. So it is important that you let your architect and builder know that you might be selling it within 10 years, because they can then instruct the certain organizations to come and review the build as that happens, so that they then can grant that insurance throughout the process.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're not going to sell within 10 years, then of course you don't need to worry about that so much. But it's always a good thing to have. Okay, so what can go wrong, Jonathan? What mistakes do you see that people make, and they should be very careful about?
Once it comes to the build side of things, most of the mistakes can often happen at the beginning when it comes to the site, where people's expectations don't necessarily match what's achievable with the site. Once it gets on site and you've got to that stage, you sometimes get the issue where people haven't quite visualized it in quite the way that they expected. So they'll see the building and they'll want to make changes. That's often, I try personally to avoid that, because I try and do everything in 3D. Some people do everything in 2D with plans, and it's very difficult sometimes to visualize a floor plan in a 3-dimensional space. So when they see it and they're standing next to it, they start to say, well, actually, I'd rather have a door here, I'd rather have a window there. So you end up having to change things on site as you go. But generally, those sorts of things can be adapted on site. The main thing is to have a clear program, a clear timetable for the project, and keep the client updated. What sometimes happens, not with me, but with other architects and with other builders, is they sort of say, well, we'll only contact the client if we need clarification on anything. And for me, it's very important that every time I visit the site, every time you go to the site, you take pictures, you send a report to the client, fortnightly, monthly, just so they can see that the building is progressing. And of course, most of the time these people are living in other countries, so it's not as if they can jump in the car and have a look at the site themselves. Of course, if they want to jump in the plane and fly over, then it's brilliant, and then they can walk around the site. You try and get as many of the questions answered as early as possible. Things like floor finishes, wall colours, all of these sort of things. If you can get them done when you're doing your drawings, even better. But sometimes people want to see examples thrown on the floor so they can pick bits and pieces. And sometimes that can cause an issue if they pick a tile or something that's hard to get hold of, there's a delay, that sort of thing. So you try and program everything early to avoid those sort of things.
So well, basically what you're saying is that it's so important to carry out a lot of this work up front to avoid changes during the build, yeah?
Yeah, you want to try and do as much as possible up front. And that helps with the cost as well, because it means that if that pack of information that gets sent to the contractor for pricing has all the information in, he knows what tiles you want, he knows what colours are going to be used, then they can already be ordering it. They know what needs to be delivered on site and when it needs to be delivered.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, Alison, so I bought my plot of land, I got a mortgage. When do I actually sign the mortgage deed, and when do I start making payments for the mortgage?
So once the self-build mortgage is approved, the bank will release funds in stages throughout the process of the build. And the build, I mean, the architect will know better than I, but the build usually lasts between 1 to 2 years, 2 years maximum, I would say. I mean, there's a level of flexibility that the banks will have as to how much they will release at each stage. So you can come to an agreement with the bank as to how much you will want at each stage. But let's say they agree to a loan of €100,000, for example, and they agree to release the stage payments in 5 lots of 20,000. They will require a valuer to visit the build site before the release of each stage payment and to certify that the agreed percentage of the build has been completed at each stage before they release the funds. Other things to point out, they will usually hold back the last payment of funds until all of the final licenses have been obtained. Okay, so basically it's stage payments throughout the build, maximum 2 years for those stage payments, and the last, it'll need to be valued at each stage. It's not a full valuation, it's basically a certificate from the valuer saying, yes, the builder has completed X percentage as per our agreement. And then the last payment is made once all of the final licenses have been obtained. During the period of construction, the client will be paying interest only on their loan until everything is completed, when the loan then reverts to a normal repayment mortgage. Okay.
Yeah, so that marries up with what happened to us. So basically, we signed the build contract, and typically with a build contract, we had to pay 10% up front, and then we basically each month, as the build progressed, the architect would sign off what had been built and the value of those build, or of the value of what had been built, and he'd issue us with an invoice. And with that invoice, we would take it to the bank, and the bank would issue a bank transfer or a check within 5 or 10 days of us presenting that certificate from the architect. And that's basically how the build process proceeded, because we did have a mortgage, Alison, and you're absolutely right. We paid interest to start with. That was a pleasant surprise, not having to pay repayment right from the start. And then basically, as the build progressed, the interest payments went up. And what is important is something which we negotiated in the contract. And I'd say it's probably standard, Jonathon, is every payment that was made to the builder after the 10%, we held back 5%, and that 5% is a guarantee basically for the works. And we agreed with the builder that 5% would be held back for up to a year, and then after a year, assuming no issues with the property, and thankfully there were none, we then returned that 5%.
Yeah, no, that's normal practice. You have a 5% retention. In some cases, it's purely on the last payment. Others, it's done on every payment. It just depends on the details of the contract. But there's 5. In some cases, it can even be 10% is held back if it's a complicated project, and that is held back for up to a year to allow for defects, basically, just to test and make sure everything's fine, there's no problems. A lot of the time, you won't know whether that house is perfect till you're actually living in it. As the architect, I would inspect the property, and at face value, I can tell if it's fine, if it's working, if everything appears to be right. But things like, you're not going to know if the air conditioning is going to be dripping until you're actually using it. So it's a very important part of the process to keep that retention there so that you can get the builder there to fix it. And if the builder refuses to fix it, you've got that pool of money to use to get somebody else in to fix it.
Yeah, no, thankfully we didn't have any issues. We didn't have to call him back at all, and it was once the build had started, it was virtually plain sailing. But because we took out a mortgage, what we had to sign is we had to sign a deed declaring the new build. So actually, based on the project that the architect had prepared for us, we went along to the notary and signed the mortgage deed at the same time. And we signed a deed saying, this is the property that we are going to build on this plot of land. And then based on that, we signed the mortgage, setting out the terms and conditions of the mortgage. Now, that was quite important because up front, because we didn't make any changes to the build, the actual build and the layout, because we maxed out on the square meters. So right at the front, we knew we could build 30% of the plot size, and we did that. And we also built a basement and under the lay of the land, which was not included in those extra square meters. So in effect, we got a lot more house than we initially thought. So we signed a deed declaring the new build because the bank needed that for the mortgage, and then the mortgage was registered by the bank on the plot of land. But Patricia, if people aren't signing a mortgage, what deed would they sign?
If there is no mortgage, once the building has been finished, they will sign the same. It's a new build deed, but already finished. So what you sign, it's the new build deed under construction, and once the construction is finished, you have to go to the notary again and sign a deed declaring that all the works has been finished. So the words under construction are removed. If there is no mortgage at all, then you can go directly and sign the new build deed declaring the property with the description, all the square meter, etc. And that property is declared as finished.
Okay, and what are the costs typically? Because basically we've bought the plot of land, you've paid either EVA, VAT, or transfer tax, and then when you sign the declaration of the new build, what taxes do you pay then?
You have to pay stamp duty of 1.5% of the declared value of the building itself, of the property. Okay,
so stamp duty basically, and there's 17 autonomous regions in Spain. Each region sets their own stamp duty. The initials for it are AJD, Actos Jurídicos Documentados. In Andalusia, it's currently 1.5%. Other regions of Spain, it's up to 1.5%. But in effect, if you declare the bill at, say, 100,000 euros, I understand you pay 1.5% of that 100,000 euros. And then once you've got that build, you've finished that certificate. Jonathan, you would have included in that deed your final certificate?
Yeah, there would be a final certificate that's issued by the architect to say that the building is completed to our project.
Okay, excellent.
So that's issued.
And then basically between the build period, finishing the build, you issuing the certificate, what comes next?
Well, the next is the habitation certificate. That's the next stage, which is really, it's the contractor themselves that do that, using the certificate issued by the architect. They have to go and register it with the town hall that this building is completely finished. Then the town hall send out an inspector who inspects the building to make sure that it meets all of the requirements, and hopefully they're happy. They should be happy. And they will issue the habitation certificate to say that it's now safe for you to live in and for anybody to live in.
And when can someone move in?
Officially, you're not supposed to move until you actually have that habitation certificate. There are houses with people living in them that don't have habitation certificates, often on bigger developments. But you shouldn't really be staying in there or living in there until you have the habitation certificate. It is difficult for you to move in without the habitation certificate because the way the law is, connecting your electricity, your water to the sewerage, telephone supplies, all of those now cannot be made unless you have your habitation certificate. And it's something that the electricity companies by law have to check when they're connecting you up. So they can't even connect you without that certificate.
Okay. And basically, Patricia, Jonathan's mentioned the habitation certificate, but we also know that as locally as the Certificado de Licencia de Primera Ocupación, so certificate of license of first occupation. So depending on the region you build your property in Spain, they have different terminology for that certificate, but essentially it's the same certificate, yeah?
Yeah, correct. It's the same. It's typically known as Licencia de Primera Ocupación or License of First Occupation, which here in the region of Andalusia, many town halls are started to change from the town hall inspecting the property and then issuing the license of first occupation or the habitation certificate, has changed to a declaration directly from the owner of the plat of the property, declaring that this is my property, it complies with the license that you granted to me to build a house, it has all the habitability requirements in place. So with submitting that documents to the town hall, it will mean the same that a license of first occupation. So in actual fact, it makes it faster, and you don't have to wait up to 10 months for this license after your property has been finished, which is good.
So, Jonathan, have you heard about that? So basically now developers have got this kind of declaration that they can basically...
I have heard of it, where the projects I've been working on, the Costa Blanca, they don't quite do it like that yet. But it changes from place to place in Spain. So it's just a matter of adapting to each area. The process are more or less the same, but they all have their own little quirks that you have to work to.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. So we finished the property. We got the license of first occupation. We present that to Alison. Alison presents that to the bank, and then heaven forbid, the mortgage goes over, and Alison, to interest and repayment. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes from so it's interest only during the course of the build, which obviously makes sense because you borrowed the money to build, so you don't really want to be making your repayments, and then it just reverts to a repayment mortgage, and everything obviously has to be, as Patricia said, has to be registered in the notary. As being a full repayment mortgage. Yeah.
Okay. And then basically, once you've got that license of first occupation, during the build, the builder's connected to what we call builder's water and electric to keep the build going, and those machines going, and etc. Once you've got the license of first occupation, then you can move into the property, and then you connect to water, electric, and other supply. Some areas also, Jonathan, ask for a license for the pool.
Yes, so some areas require it's the same as a building license for a house, more or less. But they request that for a pool, and you have to go through a similar sort of procedure. It's a lot shorter and a lot simpler, but it is a similar sort of procedure. Okay.
So great. Well, I mean, I think that seemed quite easy, didn't it?
It should be. It should be relatively straightforward. It's a long process. It can take years, but the process should be simple, and in an ideal world should be enjoyable. It's going to have its stressful moments, but it is an amazing moment when you go from a few doodles on a piece of paper with a client and then seeing their face when they turning the key to walk into the actual finished house. It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, when our house was being built, we used to go down and see it from a distance, and going up was lovely. And then when we went inside, for example, when the bricks were up, we thought, gosh, these rooms look really tiny.
Because it happens, yeah.
It's got a kind of spatial awareness issue. And the builder said, don't worry, it will be bigger. It will be bigger. We did make some minor changes to the build during the process. So, for example, the architect had put in place had suggested a planter in an area, and we actually turned that into to a cupboard. So there were minor changes which we made. I think the finishings, it was very difficult to envisage the finishings right up front at the early stage of the process. And because because there was so much going on, we didn't give that as much thought, I think, as we should have done, and we started to do that midway through the process. And maybe that's something,
The finishes is always a tricky sort of thing, because personally I prefer to do finishes while you're waiting for the license. Spend a bit of time walking around various shops, Leroy Merlin or wherever it happens to be, looking at tiles, looking at examples. And I do a lot of work in 3D. So when did you build your house?
Well, between 2003 and 2005.
There's been huge advances even just in that relatively short period of time with 3D. So with my models, I create 3D renders of rooms, and within a matter of minutes, I can change it to, well, this is one tile, this is another tile, to help people. It's not quite the same as actually being in the space, but it helps you visualize the spaces and understand what the different finishes are going to look like. And that's a long process in itself, and you've got time while you're waiting for the license to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the finishes, I think it's very important. Pay a lot of attention to the finishes, and go, if you've had enough one day to go, going out with the architect or the builder to look at finishes, and you're really tired, go home. I think don't just choose it for the sake of choosing. But yeah, it was a great experience to finally move in. We had a big party when we did move in, and swimming in your own pool is an amazing experience. Filling that up took some time and cost some money, but once all that water was in, it was a good feeling. Okay, any other comments, anyone?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Jonathan, actually, just thinking about the profile of clients. If you're dealing with clients who are maybe living in the UK or living in another country and they can't get over on a regular basis to see the build and how it's developing, I just wonder how you cope with the stress that they probably are going through without being able to come over. How do you do you visit the site on a regular basis yourself and send
Well,
how do you manage to cope with that? Keeping them happy?
The architect any architect who's working on a project, they should be going to site. Well, the arquitecto técnico operador is probably going to be there every day, every couple of days. The architect overseeing the project should be there every week, every 2 weeks. And when I go, I take photographs, I take videos, I have broadcast live from site for clients to have a look and look around. The way technology is now with platforms like Zoom, you can do that. You can literally be there on site, have a meeting with the client, and literally just walk them around the site and show them what's going on. They can ask questions. It makes things a hell of a lot easier than it used to be. I used to get phone calls even sort of 7 years ago when I first started. I was getting phone calls all the time from clients saying, what's happening? And often they have friends over in Spain who are wandering past the site taking photographs themselves. And I prefer to go, and when I'm going on an official visit, I would do a proper report. So saying this is what's done, this is what's due to be done in the next few weeks, or we're on schedule or we're behind schedule. If we're behind, why are we behind? If I'm missing information, explaining I need to know what tiles you want in the next 2 days, or there's going to be a delay. It's just a matter of keeping them updated so they know things are happening. I think often what they're worried about is they're sitting at home in the UK or wherever they happen to be. They don't know if the builder's even there on site. And they're worried that they're handing this money over to somebody who's not even building the house. So it's a matter of giving them the confidence, of sending them the information all the time.
Yeah, I think that's very important, Jonathan. Keeping clients updated through the build process. Some builders are very good at that. Some builders aren't. Some of the clients we've acted for across the country, we've always recommended if you're buying a plot of land and then you've got a builder overseeing the build, then sometimes we also recommend having a second architect or a project manager visit the site on a regular basis to provide those updates and just act as a kind of a second person checking that the build is progressing. So if people are worried that, has it been built, has there been progress, that independent person can go in there. But just remember, you've bought the plot of land, you've selected your architect, you've selected your builder, so you should have confidence in them to do that. But we as I said, we've had clients build very expensive houses, and they just wanted that extra level of checking and overseeing.
I think that's especially important if you don't appoint your own architect, if you're going directly to a developer, because often there's almost two ways of doing a project like this in Spain. You can either approach an architect direct and they will do everything, or you can go to a developer or a house builder who will have their own in-house team, their in-house architect. And I think especially if you're going the developer route and you don't have that direct contact with the architect because he's part of the builder's team, then I think getting an independent architect on board to oversee the work is an extremely good idea. I know several projects where clients have done that, where I've actually been the architect working with the developer. So I was employed by the developer, not by the actual client. And they brought in their own technical architect or architect to supervise the work, and he's rung me up to ask questions, and I'm passing information to him, and he's keeping them regularly updated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done that topic justice. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. I hope you enjoyed the seminar. We've got lots more on our YouTube channel, so please look out for these and more to come in the future. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all soon.